Now, this is the third and final video lecture for week 10. And the thing I wanted to talk about today was the further reflections on the meaning of friendship. And one thing I think about in that arena and in that set of topics is a couple of movies kind of come to mind. The first movie I really think about in regard to friendship is the Shawshank Redemption. So for those of you who have not seen it, I'll guess I'll provide some spoilers, but it's about two characters who, Andy and Red, who are in a prison together, and they undergo a lot of pretty horrible things while in prison together for about 20 years. But they develop this really, really beautiful friendship, and that's probably the best way to describe it. It's an odd expression, right? We often use the term beautiful to mean, well, she's a beautiful woman, or it's a beautiful child, or that's a beautiful sunset, or that's a beautiful painting. But think it's a little odd sometimes when people talk about a relationship between two men and say, well, that's a beautiful friendship. But I think that's an apt term because, beauty means that certain things are proportionate, they fit well together. Certain things work out well together. It's a joy to contemplate and to reflect on this thing. And I think a friendship like we see in this movie is precisely that. It's the sort of relationship where the two people can have these long, very intense conversations, but they can also joke together. They they share their humanity together, even in a situation like a prison. So there's this one beautiful scene where Andy is told is basically been able to manipulate the prison guards to get him and the other guys who are working on this roof together to get beer, so that they all can kind of enjoy the drinking beer together while they're tarring this roof. And Andy just kind of sits there to enjoy the moment and he doesn't drink, but you get a sense that like they're doing this and they're kind of remembering what it's like to be human outside the prison walls. So Andy and Red are able to reinforce that tendency in each other. They're able to sort of help each other remember their full humanity. And they do this throughout the course of their time together in prison. In a way, that's why it's called the redemption, because I think both of them had lost something of their humanity after being in prison, but their friendship allows them both to recapture that and to have that kind of redemption, that journey back to their full humanity in terms of, caring for another person, caring for a bigger picture, um, trying to be honest, trying to be good, trying to appreciate what's beautiful in life. And they foster that in each other in these really great ways. So what's also I think very interesting about these sorts of about a movie like um, The Shawshank Redemption is that the movie ends in a way that's very similar to how love stories often end. So love stories often end with the protagonist meeting up in some dramatic fashion, on an airplane or in a train or something like that, and everyone's happy and they say, "Oh, they two of them got together like they're supposed to. They're meant to be together." And the love has triumphed over all adversity. And there's something very touching about that. And we appreciate that. Um, in this movie, there is a way in which the protagonists come together. It's not in a romantic way, it's not in a marital way, but it's in a way of very, very deep friendship. And actually, I'm not going to say much more about the movie. I just highly encourage you to watch it because if you want to understand, I think it's one of those movies that provides a glimpse into what it means to be a friend, and it does so in a way that um, forces us to realize that this is actually a love story. So this is a continuation of what I was saying earlier, that there's a strong analog between like marriage and friendship. And this is a movie that brings that out because the way marriage is portrayed often in movies or in books, etc., is as a love story. It's a story of two people who grow in love to each other, who overcome adversity together, who come back together after odds, difficult odds, and being separated and growing apart. And they love will triumph in the end and provide the kind of arc or the driving force that allows the characters to move through the story and come to the climax of the story and bring it all together. And the interesting thing about the Shawshank Redemption is that it actually does this in a way, in a friendship, but it's not a romantic relationship, but a deep love that these two people have for each other that allows them to, like I said, journey more fully into their humanity, overcome very difficult odds, and eventually come together in a way that wraps up the movie and provides for a very beautiful ending to a wonderful narrative about the meaning of friendship. So I'd highly encourage you guys to watch that movie if you get a chance. There's a couple scenes that are difficult because it's taking place in prison, but it really gives you a sense, I think, of what friendship is all about. Now, another narrative arc like this in literature that we see. I mean, there's many that I could choose from, but another one is in the Lord of the Rings, and um, we see this with several different characters. Actually, it's very fascinating. So one of them is the relationship between Sam and Frodo. So Sam starts out as Frodo's gardener in a way, but then eventually they start going on this quest, and Sam, is his gardener, becomes his companion, tries to protect him, tries to help him, and Sam just will never leave him. Sam is completely loyal. He's totally trusting, and he is committed to assisting Frodo no matter what. And there are innumerable scenes in that book, especially more so in the books than in the movies, that capture this depth of Frodo's and Sam's love for each other, and the fact that they're going to stay loyal to each other. Sam is totally trusting, and they will try to care for each other no matter what and assist each other. So that's one of the parts of the book, the movie and the books especially. Another part of the books that's very fascinating is the relationship between Sam and Gimli and Legolas. Well, Gimli being a dwarf and Legolas an elf, and these are two races, if you will, that have often been antagonistic and haven't gotten along. And over the course of time, they develop a very strong relationship and they trust each other and they overcome the animosity that is sometimes felt between the two different races, between the elves and the dwarves. And they do this in a way that indicates that they protect each other in battle. They care to make sure the other person has survived. Um, but at the very end of the book, we read about them like journeying off together toward the undying, toward almost heaven, Tolkien's version of heaven. So where I'm getting with this is just the fact that these movies and these books can be helpful to illustrate the point that friendship is a love story, right? So that's a weird thing to say. We again the bias and the common understanding in our world today is that romance and marriage is the love story, and they can be, and they often are, and that's good, but they're not the totality of it. So even in the field of literature and movies, etc., we see that friendship can involve us in a deep journey of love with and toward other people. So if we're understanding ourselves as loving beings on a journey and living out a story, then we can do so even if we're not married. And one of the ways we do so, and one of the ways we do so most meaningfully, is through friendship. So I guess I'll cut this video kind of short. I just wanted to encourage you to, if you haven't seen those movies or read those books, to do so. And just as a complement to what I'm getting at here, to the idea that that friendship is deep friendship, friendship of virtue, friendship of the good that Aristotle's getting at, is in the end really a friendship, is really a love story lived out in the context of our lives.